Welcome to Talkade, a podcast based on reviewing WWF, ECW, and WCW content on a week-by-week basis from a first-time viewer's perspective. I'm Abby Devon, first-time 90s wrestling viewer and co-founder of Watchamania. We're currently in the week of May 30th to June 4th of 1994, and we'll be beginning with WWF Monday Night Raw. But before we get started, I want to ask that you drop a like on this video if you're watching here on YouTube, as it helps us a lot. And do subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure the bell's always on for notifications. Talkade always seems to drop some random hour of the day, so you want to make sure to catch it when it does. That all being said, let's dive into some Raw. So we open straight into a video package highlighting the tournament bracket and how 7 out of the 8 slots are filled. And we find out that the final qualifier will see Tatanka versus Crush. And we find out that Crush is subbing out for Jimmy Del Rey, and we're unsure as to how that came to be, as they don't say, but my guess would be that Smoky Mountain Wrestling backed out of the relationship with WWF, or vice versa. One of the two. Randy Savage has some great gear this week. Love it personally. It's purple and white with a hint of his checkered pattern, his black and white checkered pattern. One of my favorites I've seen thus far. But onto the match, we get started with Crush and Tatanka, who was escorted by Chief Jay Strongbow down to the ring. The match itself ended in a double countout after Crush sought to get revenge on Jay Strongbow for dropping Fuji with a punch a moment prior. Tatanka came out after him to stop the attack on the Chief, but they were both counted out in the meantime as they broke down into a brawl. The match itself was fun for what it was. I'm not sure why we need to stall this out for a week, other than to tell a story of how these two are so evenly matched. The course of next week's rematch, which is made later in the show, as well as its finish, will really determine if that's the story or not. They really did hit all their big moves on one another this match and couldn't beat each other until Fuji started trying to get in the ring, and that's when the finishing sequence happened. So there is that. After the match result was announced, both Tatanka and Crush got into a rough brawl that referees struggled to break up, and we were sent over to Todd Pettingill in the midst of the chaos. Now, Todd is wearing this obnoxious shirt that literally only serves the purpose of advertising the pay-per-view. It's just like the logo on top of the logo, the Baltimore Arena, the date it's happening on, and it's baggy as all hell, and it's like so thick that you could tell like this was the only instance it was ever worn. Now, he gives us a rundown of the events card, sending us over to a Roddy pre-tape. And Roddy's petting his dog, exclaiming that he's no king and wouldn't be one even if he had the time and desire to be. Which is weird because the desire is never mind. Mentions that Todd Pettingill is called this trash talk between Roddy and Jerry and says that if we think he's trying to talk trash, we're wrong. He mentioned that the WWF phoned him for a match and he agreed to do it for the kids. And that's really what it's about to him. So he's not interested in trash talk, though he does tease a bit of it. Before saying he ain't no king, he gets in his truck. And he also says that he could put a sandwich on his back and starve Lawler to death. I have no idea what he meant by that. He mentions that... apologies. Roddy cuts some weird promos, if I'm gonna be honest. This one kind of felt like he's just trying to be retired, but the WWF won't let him be, and they just want him to come back. So this was his compromise. We cut back to Pettingill, who covers the first round of the tournament and sends us over to Owen Hart, who has something to say about the pending decision regarding the double countout. Owen clarifies that he should get a bye to the semifinals, as both men were counted out, so therefore both lost the chance to be in the tournament. I find it funny how Owen has had the most circumstances surrounding his journey through this tournament thus far. First, Earthquake was changed to Doink. Now his first round opponent is getting stalled up. I like it because it's stacking the deck against him. So if he does go on to win the title one day, it's just going to be that much more glorifying. The only problem is that he's a heel in the process. So I'm like, maybe a turn will happen down the road. I'm not quite sure. It also does feel like they're trying to give us hints of gray in this Bret Owen story, because there's been quite a few instances where Bret has very clearly looked like the bad guy here. And Owen Hart has been vindicated more than once. but were sent from Todd to Vince and Randy, who sent us to Ted DiBiase in a funeral parlor. He tells us that it smells like money in there, got an emote for the Discord out of that, and that everybody has a price, dead or alive. That includes The Undertaker. Ted claims that he made contact with The Undertaker once more, and it won't be long until The Undertaker is property of the $1 Million Man. I think this can be a fun program for Taker coming back. I can see this going one of two ways. Taker somehow ends up under DiBiase's thumb, perhaps with a new solid gold urn that was made a few weeks back during the Undertaker sightings in the jewelry store. If y'all remember that, like he was like, oh, he came in to get a solid gold urn. I wonder if those tie together. If they do, I think that would be a neat little detail that I wouldn't have expected them to pay attention to. I can also see that I can see them as a result having him doing DiBiase's dirty work alongside Volkov, possibly as a tag team, as weird as that would be. But I do know Undertaker's had a lot of random tag partners in his career. I'm much more familiar with his 21st century stuff, but I think that's a precedent that's always stood with him. I could be wrong. The other way is Taker serves to be the manifestation of Volkov's sins. You know, something like that. In like a feud with Volkov on behalf of Ted DiBiase, who's like trying desperately to force Undertaker to be his. I can't see the latter having much mileage, unless it was just supposed to be like a secondary layer to the story that is Volkov trying to get out from underneath DiBiase's thumb. I think that could be an interesting narrative to tell as well, but also a little more complex than I would expect from the WWF. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was neither of those things. So it's just a time will tell thing, but it obviously has my intrigue. So we are sent down to the ring where 1-2-3 Kid is set for action with George South. Some of my favorite enhancement matches are with the 1-2-3 Kids. We also had fun with George South's name on the stream. We were sitting there just ribbing and ribbing. It was a fun time. It was a fun time. But yeah, I really do enjoy 1-2-3 Kid's matches because he's got some offense that isn't featured in American wrestling at this time all too often. Mainly, it's just his speed that makes me go, ooh. It was really a quick match that put over how fast 1-2-3 Kid can evade and strike, which I appreciate. In this time period where the prevailing logic is bigger equals better by default, for them to put over exactly how fast he is and how he utilizes that speed is a fun thing to explore. And so we go to break and come back to Jerry Lawler in the ring for King's Court. And he runs down Bret's parents for being old. Sure enough, couldn't wait 30 seconds after Bret came out to remind him of how King of the Ring went last year. Sorry. Bret is quick to set down his title, prepare for his scrap, but Lawler lets him know that they're slated to have another guest. Guess that ends up being two guests in the form of Diesel and Shawn Michaels. Bret looked a little unnerved at the numbers, but clarified that while he has respect for Diesel, he's going to find out why Bret is the best there ever was. He did his whole slogan, but I'm not going to do it here. I'm starting to see why Diesel is climbing the ranks so fast. He's doing all the big man things Vince likes, the growling, the mean smile, the bad lines that are very clearly like written by a 1930s writer. He says he's going to give Bret Hart the VIP treatment. Very intense pain. That was the most notable of the lines. I've never heard that one, but I also groaned like I heard it a million times. Like, that's how you know it's just like such classic writer vibes. Like, oh, it's so obvious. It's either been made a million times or no one ever made it because it was so obvious. Bret starts saying something, but Shawn cuts him off to get Bret's attention, and Diesel clocks Bret with a sucker punch. Hit him with a powerbomb, and like vultures, they're all over Bret. Shawn's on the ground, punching and choking Bret. Lawler's literally like, can I get some of that? And starts stomping and fist stomping Bret. Like, he said that to Diesel. It was so weird. They're like jackals. And it was, they beat the champ down. And in a way, I appreciated the beatdown because not very often you see like that vicious, just like, oh fuck, like it's not a matter of them all being a squadron as much as it was just like we all hate this guy and we're gonna get our shit off kind of thing. Some refs and producers such kind of finally came down to spell the assault, and the three kind of relish in their actions. And Diesel raised both belts very sloppily. The Intercontinental title is upside down. He was holding it like it was designed in one of the SmackDown vs. Raw games. As commentary goes over the replays of it, we cut to the entrance of the Smoking Guns, who are coming down for a match with Austin Steele and Reno Riggins. What a name. Bart and Billy get the win, and they're honestly great workers. Very fast, limber, and explosive. Tall boys, but I hate their gear. Which sucks, because the look is great for their characters. Like, it really is. The jeans, the cowboy boots, the mustache with mullets, like, it's fitting, but I just don't like it. In all honesty, I want to see them get a story going in the tag division. Like, a story at all would be fucking grand. Like, have we seen anything of the Quebecers since they lost their titles a month ago? A month ago. It was May 2nd. Weren't they supposed to be heated with one another? Has that been taken care of on Superstars? And the Steiner brothers, where are the Steiner brothers? Part of me thinks that the Quebecer situation, like I said, is handled on WWE Superstars and they're not recapping it at all. But with how neglectful they seem to be of their tag division right now, I wouldn't be surprised if it had outright fallen to the back burner overall. Which would suck. Because I actually was mildly intrigued. And it was the first time I think I've ever been intrigued with Quebecers in any capacity. So we cut over to Todd Bettingill with news from Jack Tunney, making the rematch for next week. We're told that at this time, however, it'll be a lumberjack match to assure there will be a winner. He lists a few stars that Tunney is thinking of assigning as lumberjacks, such as Volkov, the Bushwhackers, IRS, Mabel, Duke Drossy, Yokozuna, amongst others. Sounds like a way to determine the final qualifier, and if done right, a way to move a story or two along, or even start one up. I'm here for it if it lives up to that potential. And of course, is entertaining in the process. I say that as I've never been the biggest fan of lumberjack matches, but I still want to give it a shot, you know? Especially because, like, at this time, like, it's a much more fresh concept at this era than it is in, say, the 2020s. So we cut down to the ring for a match between Jeff Jarrett and Chris Hamrick. Jeff ends up getting the win here with the figure 4 leg lock. It was the third time in a 7-day period on national American television that the figure 4 leg lock won a match. And I can't help but feel like Ric Flair might feel a bit slighted at that. So we cut down to the ring for a match between I'm sorry, I just read that. Jeff Jarrett played the sly heel in this match, where he convinced the ref via pantomime that Hamrick was pulling his hair while he had Double J in a hold. It was neat. Jeff hit us with the strut a few times and constantly showboated to the crowd in between moves. Jeff hit us notably, Chris Hamrick was severely sunburnt, and it showed on every rope round, every slam. It looked rough. It was very much the energy of, he got the call 3 days ago that he was going to be on TV, and he really needed a tan. The finish came during a "We Want Doink" chant, when Chris jammed up his leg on a missed knee strike in the corner. Figure 4, and it was over. We go to break with Vince shouting to Jeff to sing to them. And I'm glad he didn't. I don't know. Jeff Jarrett right now, he's okay. But again, it's one of those things is like, you've established how he is as a worker. Now I need to see what you're going to do with his character, because his matches aren't holding it up for me. You know, the sly heel thing is fun, but I want to see him do it in an actual match. And we'll get that at the King of the Ring tournament. I suppose this was just a bit of a warm-up, a taste tester, if you will. Back from break, and we're sent over to Jerry Lawler in the back with an announcement regarding his next guest. He doesn't outright say it, but he says that his guest will be from Scotland, effectively dressed like Roddy Piper. At first I was like, oh, we're going to get that confrontation. But upon second watch of this episode, I'm most certain that this is going to be some jabroni, possibly from Scotland, dressed up. If it's not, I'll be pleasantly surprised. And that was Raw. A simple and effective episode with a story told throughout the night. We had a step made towards some sort of Undertaker DiBiase program as well. Other than that, just a few enhancement matches. And so, on to WCW. WCW. ECW. Oof. So, Paulie opens up, telling us that we're going to find out who Sabu's opponent for the 24th Supercard is. I think it was a fun bit to open up with, and one that proved even a young Paulie had no problem being the butt of a joke. He tried fronting like he already knew who the opponent was and attempt to shit talk at Sushi Onita before he's coming to the thinking that he's coming to the States. Someone calls from the background to Paul telling him it's not Onita, and a confused Paulie walks out of the shop questioning who it really could be. This was our story for the evening, which we'll come back to throughout the episode. After the intro, we cut to Sal Bellomo making his entrance, but before he even makes it to the ring, Willie Watts, the guy who I thought was Jay Sully before, but is indeed Joey Styles, sub in on commentary, he takes us to an incident that happened just before the TV taping. We cut to the ending portion of a Tommy Cairo versus Rockin' Rebel match where Cairo scoops the win over an overconfident Rockin' Rebel. Not even a single second after the bell, almost like he was waiting outside the ring, Sandman slides in and starts laying into Cairo with his cane, getting some assistance from Rebel in the beatdown. We cut back to the match, which has Sal Bellomo versus some lad. Donnie Allen, it was. They never gave him a nameplate and announcement or addressed him by the name, but Cage Match indicated to me that it was Donnie Allen, so that's who it was. I found it interesting that they're putting over how much he's for the kids and doing charity work in between him using heel tactics as the babyface in a match he was winning. More of that non-traditional psychology, I see. Yeah, he's for the kids. That's why he's raking his eyes and stepping on his fingers. It was a med match. Sal Bellomo wasn't really getting much of a reaction, it seemed, even off of his finish, which is literally just a running splash. Something about Sal Bellomo just doesn't click with me. Donnie Allen is a name I've heard before as well, although I can't place any moments to the name, so I'm wondering what the big deal was. But, well, maybe I'll see it down the line. You know, it might not be a thing right now. Maybe he's an enhancement talent now and will be a star a few years down. I don't know. We got over to Sandman and Woman with their best Cross and Scarlet impersonation going on TikTok. You know, that's not fair to insult Karrion Kross and Scarlet like that, now that I think about it, so maybe I should take that back. Still demanding money, though, is Sandman from Tommy Cairo, saying that he should go get a job. Perhaps Burger King earning $5 an hour can cover it, with enough left over for insurance. And at this point, I'm flabbergasted. Minimum wage for a non-tipped employee was $5 not 30 years ago. My, how the times have changed. Sandman gets paged mid-promo, as if the minimum wage didn't date this episode enough, and according to Woman, it's from Commissioner Todd Gordon. Sandman mentions that Todd is one of his better customers and demands Cairo pay with blood or with money. He turns to a woman and asks her what she should do asks her what she would do if she was blinded in the ring and her best friend comes out and takes her wife when she thought he was there to help her. Little projective. Woman responds, "Honey, my man would have to be blind to leave me." Okay, I don't think they were on the same page there. Sandman demands that Cairo pay his bill, and we get a rundown for ECW's upcoming shows. We return from a break to Tasmaniac coming down to the ring for a match with Kyle Shearer. Kyle Shearer's twin brother. Keith Shearer's twin brother. I'm getting their names mixed up. So this was Tasmaniac's next victim. Taz tried jumping him at the top of the match, but it wasn't long before he was on the outside taking chair shots and being thrown around Kevin Sullivan style. I love how Taz literally was slamming Kyle's head into the barricade like he wanted to break the back of Kyle's head through the barricade bars. Finished the match with a high angle half and half suplex. I loved this. Very Taz, very ECW, very yes. I just love Tasmaniac. He's one of my favorite characters in ECW, right next to Kevin Sullivan and Shane Douglas. After we get some replays of that match, we're shown a replay of last week when the ref called the match, even though JT didn't submit. It also covered him decking the ref. We cut to JT getting interviewed, and he starts off by saying that he's not proud of last week, but sometimes you just have to take matters into your own hands. JT clarifies that it goes back to when he fell out of the eagle's nest, and ever since then, people have been targeting his name. He goes on to say that people have started to feel sorry for him, and that he's started to affect business and friendship. We get a replay sometime earlier in the year when JT was challenging Shane Douglas for the ECW title one-on-one, and Terry Funk threw in the towel on behalf of JT. Strangely enough, though, JT says that he feels like he should thank Terry for forcing him to fight back and to stand up for himself, which I didn't entirely get given the clip they just showed, but I can make sense of it. JT even notes that he won the television title for a brief time, but that in turn only put a bullseye on his knee. He mentions that Pitbull came for his title and that he'll admit his shortcomings. JT passed out from the pain, but he never gave up. And it brings us back around to how people are feeling sorry for him, and that the referee last week was feeling sorry for him and thus gave up for him. And that's why he couldn't take it anymore. He says that he's still who he is, an aspiring role model, but he's not going to take it anymore. Take bullshit, take the sympathy, I guess. And it cuts to some tour dates. I really love this. Aside from Terry Funk giving up for him, that set this all in motion as a motivation for the narrative. Not sure about that one. I really appreciate the character arc that JT has gone through, and it's just kind of fallen under the radar. But we even see it going back to when he lost the title in the Pitbull zone of pain, that is a pain zone for Pitbull, to like this most recent incident where he had to give up when he didn't give up. And that's twice now that he's lost to Shane Douglas on behalf of somebody else's decision. So I really dig that. I really like where we're going with this. I'm not sure if this results in him getting a title shot or maybe getting a proper television title run, or just getting the respect that he's seeking out right now. But in any way, I'm here for it, because JT seems like an interesting character with how much he's growing a backbone, I guess. And that's not to insult the guy, it's just like the character. Because, yeah. In the Land of Savagery, he's a more traditional babyface, so we'll see how that plays out. We come back to Paulie, who's talking up the loss of sleep over Sabu's mystery opponent. He questions what plot has been hatched against them and guesses that it's Stan Hansen. Gets cut off by out-of-shot producer voice telling him it's not Stan Hansen. Paul just freezes for a moment and is gets ready to curse out Arn Anderson, but is cut off and denied once more. Paulie really thought he had it with that one, but back to the camera saying it's been a long time to Abdullah, but it's denied a third time. He throws his phone and we cut to Jason. I loved that Paulie bit. It's not totally original or anything like that, but at the same time, it's a very fresh angle on the who is the mystery opponent story. So Pitbull is being led out to the ring by a cheek bandaged Jason. He's having a match with Damian Stone, who might as well have been playing dead. They lock up, but Pitbull just shoved him off, stomped him, and otherwise did whatever move he pleaded for the opening portion of the match. The crowd was taking a liking to chanting "Where's your belt?" to Pitbull, which is funny because Mikey Whipwreck's title reign is almost as long as his was at this point. Eventually gets a win off of a full Nelson, which is a move we've not seen him win before. I don't think he's won with the same move twice, at least in the time that I've been doing Talkade. So I find that to be interesting. This match was fun for what it was. Pitbull feels like he can have great matches with people who are also skilled, and his last match with Tasmaniac proved that for the most part. And this upcoming dog collar match will be awesome. But as always, enhancement matches can only be so good, so it was what it was. They show us a recap of Kevin Sullivan beating down Mikey Whipwreck, and it cuts to Mikey Whipwreck on the ECW main set alongside Jay Sully, noticeably with one more bandage and one more bruise than he had during last week's interview. Mikey asks Jay if he thinks that Mr. Gordon will take the belt back before somebody kills him. Jay Sully reminds him that he's the TV champion, and Mikey knows, but Mikey also knows that they're kicking the crap out of him. Jay Sully just says, "Next week, Mikey, Mr. Hughes." And the fear on Mikey's face is clear as day as he points to the camera like he's gonna cut a promo. It's like, "Mr. Hughes?" And it's just Layman's, oh, I'm gonna die as he walks away. It was so fun. Mikey Whipwreck has the perfect like scared wimp voice. He's got his character down to a T, and it's clear to see why he is one of the favorites of ECW history. Just in this alone, I can't wait to see where his character goes from here, because I'm sure this is only the beginning. We go to break and come back to the ring with Shane Douglas, who defends his title successfully against Chad Austin in a relatively quick match. Have a good old match, though. A brief exchange of grip. Chad got Shane in an armbar, and Shane does a great job of working the crowd while in the hold. He even called out to Sherry, which Willie Watts is quick to point out. Sherry isn't there because he sent her on a vacation. And now, thinking back to her promo, thinking back, I suppose, thinking forward to her promo later on WCW, I'm wondering what else there might be to that. I'll talk about that more then. Shane broke the hold and got all uppity with the crowd and almost got rolled up on a fast count for it. Chad mounted some more offense, but Shane turned it around and laid in a belly-to-belly suplex for the win. And that was it. It's crazy to say that Shane only hit like 2 moves this whole match, but I liked it because it was both a bit of an elevation for Chad Austin, but it was still very much a Shane can win this when he wanted to match. So I dig that. We cut to Public Enemy out by the tracks in South Central LA. They talk about how Rocco Rock's lawyer got that injunction filed, which stopped Terry Funk from competing last week. Rocco clarified that the lawyer specified that it meant that they can't go near Funk either, which Johnny got upset about as it means that they can't go thieving about in the ECW arena. Ironically, they themselves lead us down to the next match, which is Terry Funk versus Hack Myers. I suppose technically served as our main event for the evening. Terry hip thrusts a bit to mess with Hack at one point, and also does a bit with the fans' top hat. But overall, this was about as standard of a match Terry gonna have, which was crazy to say because Terry Funk doesn't have standard matches. His weakened knee was played up too, but it wasn't ever really in trouble as a result of it. And aside from I'll get that in a sec. He played possum when Hack was reeling on the outside, which I found funny because it was so cartoony. He just dropped to the mat, penciled out. And Hack came in with a chair, but missed twice, hitting himself off the rebound of the second. And Terry Funk got the win with a spinning toe hold. That was all she wrote. Terry Funk had a little fun match. It was more for the crowd than anything. It was like a house show match, you could say. We cut back to the Public Enemy in South Central, talking about how in trouble they are with Grandma. Apparently, she's getting flack from her circles because Public Enemy are looking to beat up the Funks. Tell you something, counter went up to 1 here finally. First one of the week. They talk about how they're going to go to the Funks ranch in Texas and they're going to get the jump on them off the record before the match. Way to say that on television, y'all. Honestly, I think it'd be hilarious if they show up at the Funks ranch and just get wrecked for their troubles. But back to the thing I was saying about the match earlier, it didn't really feel like the match was referencing Terry like present day at all. Like, it didn't Terry didn't seem to allude to his fury over the Public Enemy or his brother or anything like that, aside from the knee situation. So it makes me feel like the match might have been taped a few weeks earlier or something like that, and they just aired it to fill out the show. And so we cut over to Paulie, who's desperately requesting the viewing audience to boycott the ECW arena on the 24th, as he just found out who's facing Sabu, and he's afraid for his well-being. He gives up on the begging and says, "To hell with us," and cuts to Cactus Jack in a WCW shirt, opening up and coming through a creaky door. Cactus Jack in ECW, bang bang. Hell yes. We popped so hard for this on stream and in the chat. It was lovely to experience in real time. Not to mention Sabu versus Cactus Jack. Oh Lord, will this be glorious violence personified? One has to wonder, is Kevin Sullivan going to have his back at any point? Should Paulie get on his bullshit? Is Cactus going to appear on ECW television before the Supercard, or are we just not going to see him until then? I'm not sure on either, but I hope so for both. With that all being said, we skip ahead to we skip ahead 4 days to WCW Saturday Night. Now entering June, which is looking to be a stacked month. It is. So we get the full intro and rundown for the show's matches and segments, as opposed to the cold open into a segment from last week. We get to find out that Hulk Hogan is joining WCW or not. I'm sorry, we get to find out if Hulk Hogan is joining WCW or not, and then get continuously reminded of what we found out. It'll be fun to go over. After the rundown, we come to Tony, Bobby, and Gene on the main set. Gene lets us know that we got record-breaking hotline numbers, and a resounding amount of the fan base wants to see Hogan here in WCW. Why am I getting the two mixed up today? I have no idea. But I'm with Brain on this one. Meh. I can take it or leave it with Hogan. We brought on Nick Bockwinkel to confirm the speculation from last week that everyone wanted clarity on. The two world titles are getting unified on the 23rd between Sting and Flair. Thank goodness. The real news. Go Sting, crush them jabronis. Truly, I want Sting to come out on top of this whole situation. Heenan heads off to investigate all of the shifting pieces here in WCW between the titles, getting unified, and Hogan coming around. You do that, Heenan. We shift our attention to the World TV title situation now, with Tony and Gene taking us back to last week's match, before and after the conclusion of the broadcast. This portion of the match that we didn't see had Regal getting desperate with cover after cover on Zbyszko, until finally slapping on a sleeper. Zbyszko jumps up and springs his feet off the top rope while also dropping Sir William off the apron and turns it into a cover on Regal for the win. New World Television Champion Larry Zbyszko. The awareness and timing of it all made for a great moment. I didn't think they'd do a title change like this, like recapping a previous episode, after it went off the air, but it didn't matter for the crowd. They were going nuts for this, and rightfully so. It was a banger of a match that saw someone win who we really didn't see stepping back into the ring, let alone being a champion again. We cut down to the main set where Gene is with our new World TV champion, and Larry tells us that if you were to ask him 3 months ago if he was going to be back in the ring, he'd have said you were nuts. Brings it back around to the patriotic "I did it for me and these people" angle. He says that next time Regal comes out here and speaks about Zbyszko or America, that he'd do so with some respect. I dig it. Short, sweet, and to the point with a nice bow on it, with a nice consistent story both between these two and for Regal's overarching run as TV champion. We all know that patriotism isn't too much for me when it comes to wrestling, but it wasn't driven home in this point. As we got closer to the match and around this time, they seemed to lean a little bit farther away from that and be more so about the two men in this feud, as opposed to the two nations they respectively represent. So I'm about that. So Gene brings on Sherry once more, who is ecstatic to let us know that she found him. The perfect specimen, she says. He has integrity and brains, which she prefers over being pompous and vain. Is that a dig at Shane there for sending her on vacation? She goes on to say that this man is everything a woman could want professionally. Says that it is a man who lets nothing stand in his way. Oh dear, she's talking about Hogan, isn't she? Please don't be Hogan. She tells Gene that she'll tell us at Clash of the Champions who he is. Of course we're gonna wait. Of course. It feels like it all aligns, though. Hogan being the guy. It's been strongly alluded to that this person is already on the roster, but Hogan has pretty much been here enough with the segments over these last couple of months that justify that narrative being fulfilled. It could also be a swerve. Ends up being Flair or something. That'd be interesting. So we come back from a break to Ricky Steamboat making his way down to the ring for a match with Ron Oates. Hulk Hogan is confirmed to have signed with WCW, as confirmed by an obnoxious alert running across the screen a minute into the match during a solid portion of the match. Don't worry, we didn't need this Ricky Steamboat match anyways. Brain is irate over the situation, and commentary is exclusively discussing the Hogan news. watching through this match between Ricky and Steamboat and Ron Oates was still your run-of-the-mill Steamboat enhancement match. Ricky gets some offense, gets worked over, eats his oats, goes home. We do the whole thing. And after replays of the match, we cut down to Gene, who calls this the greatest day in WCW since he arrived. Humble Gene Okerlund he is. He doesn't get much more out, however, before Flair storms into shot and gets into his face, asking him what makes this the biggest stage. Gene is all like, Hulk Hogan is on the way, in a very dumb manner, which sets Flair off. Flair questions what makes Gene qualified to make that statement, saying no matter what anyone from Sting to Ted Turner says, when you ask anyone in the world what name you associate with the WCW, it's Ric Flair. Flair continues on saying that if Hogan thinks it's a big deal for him to be coming to WCW, that's Flair, it's not. What is the unification of the two world titles. He acknowledges that Hogan is a big-time player, but until he's here and established, and he's wrestled those like Austin, Anderson, Sting, and others, that he's just a guy walking into a place that's a tough place to hang out. Weird phrase. Ric Flair gets so riled up that he almost entirely forgets his catchphrase. He goes, limousine, airplane, lifestyle in peril. Gene points out that he's getting too riled up, but Flair is rampant. He tells Hogan to be at Clash of the Champions and storms off. So I'm trying to piece together why Flair is so angry here. Hogan has been pretty dismissive of him in those few get-togethers with Gene, but he's acting like this WCW defender that stands by and for the brand. Maybe that's the angle. That Flair is trying to act like this is his turf when he's really just in it for himself. That I believe. Hulk Hogan can be the big hero and savior of WCW from poser Flair. If Flair wasn't made to look like a jackass after he's been sitting pretty on top of the card all year, I'd be a bit more into it, but Hogan already feels positioned in a way that makes the rest of WCW look like it's a step below him. And hopefully I'm proven wrong in the weeks to come. Sorry to clap like that, but yeah, hopefully I'm proven wrong in the weeks to come. We go to break and come back to Gene, who is flanked by the WCW Tag Team Champions, Kevin Sullivan and Mick Foley. Gene recaps the controversial match in Philly, where they won the titles. Kevin Sullivan mentions that he feels like he's walking a thin line between pain and pleasure. The pleasure is having won the gold, but the pain is that it is not his brother standing beside him. The Nasty Boys laid him out, so standing beside him is a rotting mass of humanity This is a quote from Kevin Sullivan. A rotting mass of humanity, a man who thought he could wander into the desert because he thought he absorbed something of my knowledge. Kevin looks at Jack and questions if he knows the difference between pain and pleasure. Jack looks at Kevin and questions if he knows the difference between... Oh, never mind. I had that right the first time. Kevin looks at Jack and questions if he knows the difference between pain and pleasure, smacking him in the process. He also knocked Gene's mic out of his hand, who frantically scrambled to pick it back up for Jack to respond. Jack claims that they were walking a real fine line and that Kevin just stepped over it. Jack claims that he is what Kevin says he is because Kevin made him into it. Kevin taught Jack everything he knows and did so well, but it's time for the teacher to listen to the student. He has two pieces of advice for Kevin. Being his partner, get used to it. As for the slaps, never again. Bang, bang. Lovely promo. I dug this, and this is coming from someone who knew nothing of their history before this little story. I don't even entirely get it outside of being a very extreme and unorthodox reunion of a teacher and student, but I loved the promos, and the match was fun. A very shook Gene sends us to the ring. But I do really dig this angle, and I'm wondering to see how much of it's going to bleed into ECW, if really any at all. Up next, we had Nasty Boys versus Larry Santo and Mike Winner. Hope that money was... I'm sorry. Hope that money was good to Santo and Winner, because I wouldn't know much about this match other than the Nasty Boys won it. as we had to be reminded 3 more times by that alert that Hulk Hogan was signed. So not only did they get roughed up by the Nasty Boys, but their match wasn't even watchable. So it's not like they can be like, we were on TV, without it having this asterisk next to it. So our commentary, of course, was not of tag team action, but of Hulk Hogan having signed. We're told that next week on Saturday night, we'll have a press conference over the official signing of Hogan. Neat. Anyways, per usual, the Nasty Boys were overly rough and got the win to rebound off their tag title loss. The Sags got the win with a diving splash. Not much else to say about this match, really. Nasty Boys aren't the highlight of the show by any means on any occasion. We go over to... You know what? I say that, but at Spring Stampede, the tag match with Jack and Payne was actually a pretty decent match. It was one of the best on the show. So we go over to Gene Okerlund at the main set, who reminds us of big man Ray Taylor, formerly Boss, who is out in New York City training with the Guardian Angels. We get a video package of Ray Taylor partaking in their training and their patrols. There's this one Guardian Angel talking up Ray, saying that a lot of people don't have what it takes. They don't have the heart. Ray goes on to say that the Guardian Angels stand for the justice that he stands for, and that this is people helping people. We get a bit of montage of their drills. Person talking, we learn, is the creator of the Guardian Angels, and he says that they serve the purpose that is the old cop on they serve the purpose that the old cop on the street used to. Talk with the grandparents, be the role model to the children, explain what the Guardian Angels are doing on a regular basis, and convince them that they are up for the job. I see that this has legs. But now I wonder, is this leader just a wrestler playing the leader, or did they get in contact with the actual group and were like, hey, want to do business with us? I wonder that because I also wonder how they got back to pro wrestling with this. Or rather, how they'll get back to pro wrestling with this. Is Ray Taylor just going to show back up and use his newfound skills to be a better wrestler and win more matches? Is he going to try and earn his badge back from Nick Bockwinkel, who is apparently... runs this joint? He's the sheriff in town now? And do any other Guardian Angels come back to WCW with him? I'm interested to see if this becomes anything more than something that creative drops in the future. We return to the ring where we have Steve Austin defending the U.S. Heavyweight title against Marcus Bagwell in our main event match. He gave us a big hip wiggle, which I appreciate. Gave me hope in regards to Too Cold. 5 seconds in, commentary is telling us Hulk Hogan has signed. Like, I get that they're trying to cover this like for the people that are likely tuning in during the show or later during the show, but it's silly at this point how much they've talked over the rest of the program to say that he's here. We're in a main event title match. We're getting an alert about Hogan signing as if it's a tornado warning or something. For what it's worth, the match was much less deserving of this treatment than the previous two. I think Bagwell worked very well here, being much more crisp than he was before his team with Too Cold was formed. Austin made his holds and offense look good as well, so props to him on that. Both of them being so explosive made this match very exciting to watch, save for the rest hold bits. I think this match really highlighted Marcus's growth as a singles competitor in the last year or two. Then again, he was in there with Steve Austin, who could make drawing paint an exciting thing to watch. I still feel like Steve Austin's finish is bad, as both attempts to lock it in looked more like a weird leg-on-leg roll-up than an actual submission, and you can't quite make out the struggle, so you don't know when it's specifically locked in. And especially in this era, when it's only verbal submission, there's no such thing as tapping out, you don't know Austin has it in until the bell rings anyways. So it's this double whammy for the crowds to not know when to pop, you know? Marcus really fired up after both attempts, though. However, a failed diving drop kick cost him everything, with Austin stacking him high, grabbing the tights to get the win. And I dug it. It was a fun match to close the show on. Tony Schiavone ran off Bobby Heenan on commentary with Hogan talk during the replays, which got a chuckle out of me when I finally heard the headset just like drop. After the replays of the match, We cut to Gene with Austin, Rob Parker, and Ming over on the main set. Gene lets us know that Austin will be meeting Johnny in a rematch at Clash of the Champions for the US title, but Rob Parker says standing next to Gene is the greatest star of all, Steve Austin, who's making the US title the most prestigious title as a result. Steve mentions that everyone in WCW wants a piece of Steve Austin in the US title. He mentions that while he's the #1 contender, he isn't getting shots at the World Championship, and that's because you know who is ducking him. Flair? Sting? Austin moves on to Johnny B. Bad and acknowledges that he's progressed quicker than anyone else in the sport today. Tell you something counters up to 2 here. So only got 2 this week. He has had this really awesome line. He says that Johnny can come over and mow his lawn or wax his car, but if he comes looking for the United States title, it's going to be a sad day to be a bad man. Gene sent us home for the evening, and that was WCW Saturday Night. Newsworthy episode. Well, it was mainly Hulk Hogan to WCW confirmed, but we got Ric Flair going nuts, Sherry found her man, Zbyszko's the new world TV champion, and Steve Austin is going to run through Johnny B. Bad again as the greatest star of all time. I put quotations around that like modern day he wouldn't be seen as that legitimately. It's crazy how Rob Parker called that. I suppose in hindsight, the greatest promoter on planet Earth is justified in a way. That's fucking nuts. This realization I'm having in real time, it's not even in the damn script. And so, hope you enjoyed this week's Talkade. As always, do drop a like if you haven't. It's so easy and helps so much. Tell you something counter was short this week. I only caught 2 uses and none of them were on Raw. So credit to WWF for that. The week overall was a busy one, despite ECW being scarce on matches and Raw having a non-finish in one of the promoted ones. WCW was obviously the most newsworthy this week. But June overall is shaping up to be a very busy month for 94 wrestling-wise. So make sure to keep that bell on for notifications. Like I said at the top of the show, Talkade always goes out some random hour of the day. You want to catch it when it drops. We are also live several times a week for AEW Dynamite and Rampage watch-alongs at the time they broadcast here in the States, as well as the Watchamania Invitational, live on Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. GMT. So, until next time, I'm Adby Devin. Peace, y'all.